This is the Reflector Reflections podcast. My name is Annie. Join me as we journey around the world, talking with fellow human design reflectors as we explore our unique designs. Don't even know my own script. Today, we're joined with Laci, and a little bit of a starter is that we decided to just have a chat about parenting. So let's just go straight into it, because parenting as a reflector or raising reflectors is really, it's asked and spoken about so much, isn't it? And
Yes.
we were just both commenting on this post. That's how we started it. We're both commenting on this post, and there's some really, really good feedback in there. And we thought, let's jump on and actually record something that hopefully will help somebody and start a bigger conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah.
And
And for
I'm
those
impressed
that
that you remember I'm
pardon,
impressed that you remember your lead in every time.
I forgot it just then. I'm like, what do I say again? And just for those that don't know Laci, I'm sure you should, but if you don't, Laci is a 2-4 in the reflector world. And dear Laci, you're also a quad left. So it's a bit of a joke that we had here before. I'm like, oh, well, I have got this so I can stay on track, on task. Laci will generally be able to pull this righty in, righties and lefties together.
Yes, although not as much as normal people, non-reflectors probably.
Which is
but
which
more
is
than a
good.
but then more than a reflector quad right.
Yeah. All right. So we're kind of letting this roll as naturally it is. We've got some talking points here, but I guess our shared passion of parenting. Now, we both have a million kids each. And I feel that while we're just two people in this conversation, we have a bit of, I don't know, wisdom and stuff to share about parenting. Now, neither one of us has a reflected child, so that in itself is a completely different discussion. However, being a mum that is a reflector and raising the other types is met with certain challenges, and we thought let's talk about it. So, would you like to share a little bit of your parenting, like how many gazillion kids you got?
Yes, sure. So I have 4 kids. My oldest is 16. He is a generator. He's a 6'2" generator. And he's an emotional generator. My next one is 14. She's a female. She's a manifester. She's a 6'2" emotional manifester. The next one is 9. He identifies as a male. He's a manifesting generator, a 3-5 man gen that was born on the same day as my husband, who's also a 3-5 man gen. So that's an interesting mix there. And then my youngest is 7-year-old. He's a 5-1 generator, and he is a pure generator.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And
So
I
those are
have
those are my
4 as
four.
well. And my eldest is a 6-2 pure generator. My second is a 3-5 emotional generator. So those two are quite old, and they're both fast approaching their first Saturn return. And then my two littlies are an 8-year-old 2-4 splenic projector and a 4-6 emotional mani gen. And then I also have a part-time foster who is a 3-5 emotional manifester. So we have a little bit of sometimes in this house, all types. And
Yeah.
I don't know about you, Laci, but sometimes, when we jump into this experiment of, human design and how each of these types we need to respond or speak to them differently. And it can get
Absolutely.
overwhelming, when you first start. I don't know about you, but I'm like, oh, that's right. I've got to, yes, no questions here, or and not for this. And you just get a little bit like, oh, how do you deal with that, by the way?
Oh man, I feel like oh my gosh, how do I deal with that? I feel like it's a little bit easier for me. I already knew my kids were super different from each other, and I already knew they I already spoke to them differently and interacted with them differently. I had a lot of like family conditioning from my childhood, raised by generators and manifesting generators in a family of generators and manifesting generators. With my older brother was a projector, and I have one grandma that's a projector. And everybody else, cousins, I think I have one cousin that's a manifester, but we have like 40 something cousins. Everybody are generators and mangens. So like I was just surrounded by generators and mangens. Um, but this is one of those moments I'm like, where was I going with that? So a lot of family conditioning to really adultist conditioning that like you adults are what matter. Kids don't matter as much as adults until they reach adulthood, and then all of a sudden they like magically have the same say, like very much respect your elders. Elders are always correct. You can't treat your kids differently. That's not fair. You need to try to make everything, nothing is fair, but you need to try to make everything as fair as possible. So I had a lot of that conditioning. And really, when my second was born, my manifester, when she was born, it within the first, by the time she was 1, I was already like, whoa, this kid is completely different. This kid is different. Like, I cannot treat her the way that I treat other kids. Like, she just doesn't respond the same. She would get injured and act like nothing happened, like pretty severe injuries. And she would, when she was learning to walk, she'd fall down and like it was nothing. She would like look at you like, I can't believe I fell, and then would just get up and keep trying. But if someone told her no, it was like she had been murdered. She came to the first time she ever was crying. I thought she was like severely injured because she was like hyperventilating. She could barely talk. But she was saying, "Daddy, say me no." And she was saying over and over, "Daddy, say me no." So like, Daddy told me no. And I was like, "What did you do to her?" And my husband was like, I literally told her she can't walk up the stairs by herself. And it was like she had been, had a broken femur or something, like some kind of crazy injury. And so that several little things like that just made us realize really quickly, like, wait, we're not gonna, we can't parent these kids. We can't parent them the same because they're different. There's a book called Parenting with Love and Logic that is a lot of the teachers. So when I was a kid, um, I think it was in the 90s in the United, especially, well, I'm from Texas, so I know it happened in Texas where it got really popular. It was called Teaching with Love and Logic. And so my mom told me about that. Well, so this was a fun thing my projector brother, who's older than me, about 14 months older than me, loved to tease me about as we were little and getting older, is that he would always tell me like, you're such a bad kid. Mom had to take a special class to be able to parent you. And which was not, well, she would then later say like, no, I took that class because it was required for teaching, but it was helpful to have with a child that is, because I was very much a, why, like, I understand that you're the adult and you're telling me this, but I would really like to understand why. And just, just was, it was, and I was a reflector kid, so I think it just was harder for her. So anyway, so that was my brother's favorite thing to tell me. So, and I had seen her in the classroom, how she interacted with her students, and I really liked how she interacted with her students. And so I asked her when my youngest was about 1. I was like, what book is that? Can I find that somewhere? And so I started reading those books also. And so that was really helpful because it was just a different approach. It basically is an approach of like treating them like they are a human and that they have their own, you know, being, and that you're just trying to support them in growing into a healthy adult, or, giving them the tools that they need and the resources that they need, but also like respecting their autonomy. And so I really liked that. And so we had to really plug into that with her. And so then when we had the third, I was like, gosh, this kid is completely different also. So So we kind of learned those things and started doing those things when they were little. And then whenever I learned about their human design, I was like, oh my gosh, no wonder. I didn't have to correct a lot with my manifester because we had already figured out, like,
Yeah.
it sounds horrible, but we let her do almost anything that she wants to do that's safe.
Yeah.
Because when she gets the urge, she gets the urge, and if it's unsafe, then absolutely we're not going to let her do it. But most things that she has to do, when you stop and think about it, you're like, oh, I don't know why you can't do that. Let's
Yeah.
consider finding a way for you to be able to do that. um and then my generators, like, learning, so learning about their type is when I was like, okay, that's helpful to know, because I was a Y person. And so I really wanted to understand why they would answer things in the way that they would answer.
Mm.
And we would just get I don't know, especially as our teenager was getting closer to being a teenager. And so that was really helpful for me to learn that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter why. If that's their answer, then that's their answer. Um, the other thing that was really helpful is, we live in Texas, and we live in a small rural town, and I'm from a small rural town in Texas. So they're very big on yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am. Not saying like yeah, like any grunting noise is considered like rude and um disrespectful, especially if it's to an adult. And so that was super, we'd already stopped doing that at home a long time ago, because I just noticed that they would act confused. Like, it would be because I also, now, then I didn't completely 100% know. um but I can feel their sacral response. And so there were times when I would feel the, like, oh, they don't want this, especially with like food or something. And especially interacting with other adults, I would feel how, like, just uncomfortable they were getting, and how just it just in like dysregulated. and and then when they were asked like why, and they were like, they were want people wanted them to express themselves in a different way, it got confusing. And so we just started kind of changing, so we didn't make them do that at home anymore, because I noticed this is weird. Like, you can literally talk them into
Yeah.
anything. You can talk them into wanting whatever they want, even though their first reaction was ugh. You can and they'll talk themselves into it if there's not a way to explain it. And so I just didn't want them to, I wanted them to have their own autonomy, and to be able to, like, stand up and say what they really wanted or didn't want. And so we stopped making them say yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am. We still asked them to be respectful, but we would, if they said, oh yeah, yeah, then we'd be like, okay, that's
Yeah.
good enough. If we asked them if they wanted something. Now, if I said, son, I need you to do the dishes, then he would have to say yes. Like, he wasn't allowed to be like, that's a yuck for me. Now he's old. Now they're older, and they will be like, that's a yuck for me, mom, but I will still do it. Um, but now I have other little tricks that usually make it where I can, like, figure out what they want to do and don't want to do. Yeah, so that's kind of how we evolved. And then when I found out they were generators, it was like a light bulb of, oh my gosh, no wonder. And so then we just doubled down. We just doubled down on that.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, talk through something, we just go with their gut, and then switch to trying to teach them to listen to their body
That's
and
it.
really
Yeah.
plug into their body.
It's really interesting because for me, I was so young when I became a parent. I was 17 pregnant and 18 birthing. So I'm a kid, raising a kid, and she was obviously a generator. Um, and then the Darian came along 3 years later. And then I was a single parent pretty much 4 months after having her. I just was like, I'm out. I'm done. So something initiated for me, even in that space of that, looking back. Hindsight's always a gift, by the way.
Mhm.
Um, now, those two, because my second born was emotional, I always, in a way, favored her. And I didn't know it at the time. I had no idea about any of this. Oh, I think I knew astrology a little bit, but that was about it. Um, she could never do no wrong. And it's interesting because she's the 3-5, and I really identify with her and the life that she's had. And I think at an innate level, I always knew that. I'm like, oh, she's gonna have a bit of fun here. I've got to let her explore it. But one thing, and when we were kind of going back to, I had no idea even about yes nos, but going back to that post that really sort of like sparked it for me is about how do we manage it. One of the ways that I managed without knowing anything about anything, and I've had to have a little moment of guilt about this as a parent, but now I'm like, no, I actually was advocating for myself. So I was working full time, raising my children, two girls on my own. They were in primary school, and they would go to after school care. It's like when your kids finish at 3 and you mightn't get home until 4:30, 5 o'clock. So they go to after school care. Don't know what it's called in other countries. And I
After
would
school.
be after school care. Say,
Yeah.
OSH.
Or at least where we are.
There's always abbreviations. And at one point, because I was so stressed, I remember just being so like, the noise, because what would happen is they would get in the car and it'd just be motorized mouths. And we did this and this happened. And I'm trying to drive. And I'm like, oh, I can't fucking handle this. And I remember there is this time where I remember the rage in my body. And sometimes I'd be like, can everyone just be quiet? Like there was a constant feeling sometime of just this. It'd build and build and build.
Sure.
And so I adapted and I said to the girls, look, I don't want to snap at you for no reason. It's not fair on you. It's not fair on me. And I've been at work all day around people, realizing now, when we get in the car, could we just have quiet that 10-minute drive until we get home? And then can we have a chat about your day? And I remember that they were, maybe 8 and 10, around roughly those ages at the time. And they did it, Laci. They did
Yeah.
it. And that was how I got through in that small area, because you've got to pull on these. But I never asked, I don't even think I did, or maybe I did, I don't know. But I did always know. And in hindsight, looking back, the second was emotional, and just
Yeah.
how long and still to this day, it takes her a while to make a decision. I just
Yeah.
give her clues, and I just, but navigating, because they were already adults by the time I found human design, I had to kind of go back and look in hindsight. So there was a fair bit of guilt and shame about that. But at the same time, going, you were doing the right thing, Annie. You were already starting to honor your energy. But when I
Yeah.
became a parent again for the second time with the next two, I was very aware. So it was a completely different ball game. And I really felt that because my third daughter is a projector. It was it was cool. Like it was just easeful. And she had her own challenging moments, as parenting babies and things, with things. But yeah, it was just easeful. And all of a sudden, then with my fourth, because he's the manifesting generator, and he's got a fully defined will center, like every
Yeah.
gate. I love him. You know what? He is the most. Can I just say this? And I know I roll my eyes. If you're ever watching me talk about my son, it sounds like he's like a weapon, and he is. But he is the most loving, beautiful boy ever.
Yeah.
And he's the
Yeah.
first one to come and say to you, yeah, he'll give you compliments. He's very observant, but holy shitballs, man, he can just, you feel it. You feel it like it just charges up, and it's just like, whoa. I joke and I
Yeah.
call him our overlord, because it's like, well, if you don't know something, Jax will tell you. It's just,
Yeah.
and they're energies. So it's different for me now. Again, I sort of parent and even grandparent now that I'm a grandma, by
Yeah.
by in a way, by design. And it's been very helpful for me, even with my daughter, even though she's not into human design like I am. When Lily was born, she was saying to me, there's something, and I had a look at a chart, and she's got low sound. And so it was like, just
Mhm.
try this, like, just try this with her. And then it was just, I don't know if it was that or just was her age, you never know, but it's always like, for science, just try it on.
Yeah.
she needs really a low calm, and she's got caves. So it was like, just set a room up in this way and quieten it
Yeah.
down. And
Yeah.
so
This
parenting.
is this is what we did with my first. And then when the second came, we were like, what the heck? She doesn't like to be touched. She doesn't like to be, she likes sound. She doesn't like to be warm like the other one. She doesn't like to be in a little cave. Yeah, so interesting. And now, yeah, looking at their design, you're like, oh my gosh, duh. So, because you said about your kid, also, I think you know this, but please interrupt me if you ever need to interrupt me, because especially if I'm just rambling. Um, Yeah, so how you said that you would drive and pick them up and that you did a good job of advocating for yourself to say, "Hey, I need 10 minutes." So this is where I was a little bit lucky with the job that I had because I would come from really craziness a lot of time
Yeah.
and come from, potentially a trauma or an emergency C-section or counseling someone about hospice or an end of life at the bedside with like end of life stuff before I went to go pick up my kids. And so I really had to I learned the hard way to not just go pick them up because I also just wanted to have them as fast as I could. And I didn't want them to have to stay at daycare after school stuff any longer than they had to stay there because I just, wanted to be back in mom mode and be around them. And I also, you have that mom guilt of,
Hmm.
oh my gosh, my poor kids, especially if everybody else has already picked up and all that stuff. But I learned really quick I couldn't just dive into that situation. I had to take some time. So whether it was sitting in my car, so even if I was running a little bit late, like if it was 1 minute, I had to sit
Yeah.
for 1 minute alone in my car and just decompress and just, do like a meditation or breathing or listen to, you know, Taylor Swift, Why You Have to Be So Mean, like blasting or,
Yeah.
some song of the moment that like helped me to like process emotions like quickly. And like scream the song and then be able to like, calm myself down on the drive on the way over there. But really it got to where I would make sure I was in the right headspace. And then I also by kid three. So kid one and two obviously was, you're just learning. There's nothing, it's hard to just know. You just are learning as a parent. But by kid three, and especially now kid four, like I don't go pick them. When I go pick them up, I make sure I have snacks. It's very different than my husband. I make sure I have snacks. I have water for me and them. And I make sure that I have had like a moment before I go get them because they're going to get in the car and it's just going to happen, especially if all four of them are in the car. And then I will take them to a park or we'll go to like the elementary school park and we all get out of the car and I let them, especially my man Jen, but I let them run and play. I let the teenagers sit and talk to me, but usually they'll like go to the swings or they'll sit on their phone for 5 minutes or something. Like I don't regulate what they do. And then by the time we get back in the car, it's not like that intense buzzing of engines and pressure and emotions like all, in a pressure
Yeah.
cooker the whole way home. And then I think too, they a little bit, I taught them this. I didn't know I was teaching them this, but they each have kind of figured out when their mom time is.
Mm.
And so, the little ones usually get mom time like right when they get home. And they'll either come and like, decompress to me about their day or they'll talk to me about things. And then they'll go kind of be on their own and kind of decompress for a little bit. And then the older two will usually like go off somewhere. They might get a snack or do something, and then they go off for a little bit. Even if they have sports or whatever, but when they get home, they'll talk in the car, and then they get home and they go off somewhere and they kind of decompress on their own. And then they'll come and want to talk to me
Yeah.
usually late at night. And so I've had to regulate that and ask my husband to be like, hey, I need you to help me because our teenagers now at like
Yeah.
11 p.m. will come in my room and be like, Mom, are you awake? Like, I am now. And then they like talk to me incessantly until like 1 or 2 in the morning. And I want to hear what they have to say. I love it. I want to know how their day is. I want to know all the little tiny things. I want to know that, my son has a crush on a girl and doesn't know how to talk to her and wants advice on how to talk to her. And that my daughter, you know, did a thought or info dump on a friend about penguins and how they give pebbles and now she feels social anxiety about it. Like I want to know those things.
Yeah.
And that's when, the really juicy, beautiful stuff comes out, of who they are as people and what they're struggling with and what they need help with. So I want
Mm.
to know those things, but it can't be at 11 o'clock at night. Like we had to, so that took me having to, because they were doing that, because that's when the whole rest of the house was asleep.
Yeah.
And so they knew I was probably also asleep, but they knew like, well, we'll wake mom up. Mom doesn't gripe if you wake her up. She loves me and she won't gripe at me. And so I had to make sure that I made space before I went to sleep to go up to each of their rooms and say like, hey, I'm going to sleep in an hour. What are you doing right now? What are you let's talk, and either sit on their bed with them or and just spend like purposeful one-on-one time with each of them, so that then when I went to sleep, they weren't, oh my gosh, mom. And then I also told them, don't, you can't come wake me up anymore. This is where my husband was super helpful, because he, in a very kind and caring way, also was like, listen, you can't wake mom up at night. She's not going to gripe at you, but you can't do that because it's not good for her body. She needs sleep. She won't tell you this, but she doesn't go back to sleep after you wake her up. It takes her forever to go back to sleep, all those things. And so he also has been helpful in, like, he does the whole bedtime thing for the youngest two, so that I have time and space to spend time with the older two
Mm.
before I go to sleep. And so that's been incredibly helpful.
One of the it was a really good question that somebody asked recently was, well, what's so different about being a reflector parent? And I really sat with that and I thought parenting in itself is challenging, regardless of type, regardless of situation, like parenting in general, and especially parenting in this modern world where there's not as much family support around and things like that. So parents and caregivers are, they're chasing their tails, trying to one, earn earn an income to support their family financially and keep the roof above their
Right.
heads, for lack of better words, as well as navigate their own time, their interests, as well as look after their kids, as well as do all these things. But I've also found, when I sat with that question myself, and I'd love to hear your feedback on this. I feel that, and you were saying it there before, it's just like you automatically know that when you're doing this or when you're picking up or whatever, you've got to get snacks, you've got to get that. And I find that in the reflector experience, from me personally, I'm very aware of what's happening in my family. I'm very aware what's happening even at the other end of the house. I know what's
Yeah.
happening with my partner, even though there's often times I cannot verbalize it because it's pre-verbal, it's instinctual, it's not even really, it's archaic. I
Yeah.
know what's going on with my children. Again, can I fully bring that into my consciousness and solve all their problems? No, but I feel that. And I think that is why we need a little bit more time and a little bit more support, because it's not that we can't do any of this, because we all can. It's more, this is just my thoughts here. It's more about that we are taking on through those open centers so much automatically that unless we have a little bit of that, what you were saying, taking those minutes to just sit in the car, do breathing, to discharge the energy of everything else from others, that's, I think, when we become like a really tight coil. The spring it just coils up, it coils up. And finally, that's when you get the, rage. You get that postpartum rage or just mother rage in general. It's just because the body is just screaming.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I don't know how, for me, undefined centers feel like pressure. It feels like pressure. When my undefined centers are activated, it feels like pressure. Um, and by pressure, it's almost like, I don't know, I played sports as a kid. So what it makes me think of is an image of like a coach following you and being like, come on, come on, come on, let's go, let's go, let's go. Like it's such an intense pressure that it's really hard to ignore. And you really have to learn. I mean, I spent my whole life listening to the pressure and being like, oh, let's go, let's go. Oh my gosh, okay, let's go. Because that's what I thought it was. I thought it was my intuition and I thought it was my body and things telling me, oh, that means go. Instead of learning like, oh, that's actually a little bit of a, well, I tell my kids it's a trick. It's not really a trick. That's kind of a misnomer, but I tell my kids like that pressure is a trick. It's actually a boundary. It's like bumping up against a little electric fence. But for people who have a defined center, that electric fence is like a fence. It's like the Jurassic Park fence where you touch it and it like throws you back
Yeah,
50 feet and like
like that.
electrocute you. For people with an undefined center, it's like one piece of electric wire buried like 2 to 4 feet below the ground. So you're like feeling and you're like, is it? Is that? Oh no, is that it? Is that? Did I feel a bump? I think that was a bump. And so it's really hard to know that boundary. It's just you, and then once you cross it, you're like, oh, okay, I crossed it. 'Cause now I feel all the not self stuff and all the like, I feel tired and all that stuff. But it feels like that pressure. And so I completely forgot where I was going with that. I completely forgot what I was going with that. But that, like, for me, I had to learn that that feeling of that intensity it was really valuable for me to learn that I don't have to hold it. I can, just like a pressure, because it starts to feel like a pressure cooker. Like everything is just building and there's so much pressure, especially the more people that are around.
Mm.
And so I had to learn that I have to like take that lid off and let it flow through me. And if I physically can't, because it seems like it'd be so easy to just be like, oh, it's not yours, Annie. Just let it flow through you. Just dilute it into the ocean. And that's beautiful. And I'm like, yes, it's a drop in the ocean. I'm the ocean. It's a drop. Let it be a drop in the ocean. I think that's beautiful imagery. And I'm trying, like I'm 4 years in and I work on it, but sometimes it's just so overwhelming, all that like pressure. So for me, I had to learn that if I couldn't let it flow through me, then I had to create time and space to get away from it.
Yeah.
Um, I think as far as like the way I explain it to my husband with his, like, reflector parent versus generator parent, really just reflector versus generator energy is when his motor is burned out, like when he hits that time of like he burned out his motor, it's like he has narcolepsy or something. It's like someone flips a switch and he's like, oh, he like can't, he
Yeah.
can't. And if you try to make him push through, it's like he's inebriated. Like he can't function, and he gets snappy and he just like super not so like he just really it's so hard for him. Whereas for me, oh, I can push through like crazy and I can do it with a happy heart and a happy face and look like I'm not pushing through because I've practiced it for 43 years. Like I know exactly how to push through. But it's injuring me. So that is what was a really important thing for us to both realize and learn, and especially for me to realize and learn. I I 100% can push through and I can do all the things, but it's pulling from my tank's already empty and it's pulling from an empty tank
Mm.
and it's literally injuring me in the burnout.
This
That's
is
that's
also,
such a
sorry
but
to
no,
talk
go
over you
ahead.
then,
Yeah.
but this is also and I know this might upset a few people in saying this, but I see it. This is also their stereotypes, and it's something that we talk a lot on here in my space, in the work that I do, where it's still around. Like we are trying to change it, but women are still conditioned, reflector aside, we're still conditioned that we have to do more because we're the nurture aspect. It's in our DNA.
Yeah.
And the men, just saying here, but generally, as loving as they are, they're very practical. Like there was a period, just using an example, where when we first had the kids, and I wasn't getting time. then I was becoming like increasingly grumpy because I didn't really know how to ask for it because I was still on
Yeah.
that mindset of going, no, well, I'm the mum, I've got to do this. Whereas deeply,
Yeah.
I was like, I just want to go away for a while.
Yeah.
Um, and it was like finally when I, plucked up the courage to sort of say, look, I'm really burnt out and I need some time. And it was just like, yeah, of course. Well, why didn't you say something? They're
Yeah.
very different. And it's just like, oh, because I wanted you to ask, or something like that. But I have found in this new way of parenting, second time round, there's this, they will just go and do stuff. And I think it's also their upbringing because they were kind of like allowed to do that by their mums and their grandmas, because they
Yeah.
would do everything for them. They don't mean
Yeah.
to do that. It's that I'm not sort of shaming men in that, but it's just like some men, I shouldn't generalize here, or partners in general, they they don't think the way that we do. And so
Mhm.
we get caught into this mindset that we have to do it all. And so then
Right.
we take on all of this, right? And then we just go, oh, I'm too overwhelmed. I don't know,
Yeah.
but I've
Which is,
experienced that.
yeah, absolutely. Which is all conditioning, right? Like
Yep.
this is one of the beauties of human design, I feel like, and of conditioning and learning about conditioning is that we can just let all of that stuff go. So that has been incredibly important for me on I don't every level. My husband on every level, our relationship with each other, our relationship with the kids. So like you were saying, what's going on in the house. Same. Like I know I don't it's almost like it's a sixth sense almost. If I ask one of my generator kids or my husband, any generator, I've practiced with I was seeing 20 to 40 patients a day. Like I've practiced with a lot of generators. Um, I can ask them a yes or no question. I don't have to wait for an answer. Like I feel it the minute their sacral response hits, like I feel it. And so I've had to learn with my kids that I can't do that. I have to wait and let them actually process their feelings and actually let them answer. And that I can't expect other people to do that. So I used to get really frustrated because I thought people lied. I thought people were lying to me. Um, and then until I realized, oh my gosh, they're lying to themselves. Like they don't mean to lie to me. They literally haven't processed anything that their body has told them yet. Like they're not processing it. They haven't put the synapses together. They haven't had as much practice as we've had because as a reflector, it's not just the relationships you have with your family that you're experiencing, right? Like every single relationship you've had your whole entire life, it's like seeing them completely raw the minute they're 15 feet away from you. Like you see everything so fast. And so to be able to define something, an example is what's an easy example? Well, like an apple, right? So say you go to a place that they've never seen apples before and you're trying to show them an apple and you grew up with apples, it's not going to take you very long. And they tell you their word for apple. It's so
Mm.
easy to memorize that word for apple, right? You're like, oh, it's an apple. This is the word for it. But then it takes them so much more time to recognize, oh, this is an apple. Oh, this other thing is also an apple because they're just learning what the heck an apple is. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so one of the things that was really important for us was to just let go of the things that we both were conditioned to think we had to do
Yeah.
and really plug into the things that we are designed for. And so now that's been really helpful because when I said I needed rest, my husband, who is amazing, he was like, no, no, you don't get rest. He wasn't like, yes, sweetie, of course, take rest. He was like, no, you don't get rest. Like, you can't just leave me with the kids and you can't like this is like he completely like freaked out about it. So then I even more was like, okay, I can't rest. Like this isn't okay. And so now him learning about my design, me learning about his, it's really made it easier to just redistribute those things. So like if he forgets to take them snacks when he picks them up from school, I'm like, okay, well he's a 3-5. So I'm like, okay, well, natural consequences. for all of them, they're all experimenting every day. And I don't used to, I would be like, how could you not know that like they really need that when you pick them up, and that you got frustrated that they're acting this way to you in the car, but you didn't, if you would have provided these things, they wouldn't have done this. So used to, I would have made him wrong for that. And he would have made himself wrong. It would have been, the whole not self, like really feeling undervalued and beating himself up. Well, this is why I don't pick them up and you need to pick them up. And
Yeah.
so we really had to shift to know like, okay, hold on. You're not designed to hold that, to feel that and know that. So he now will take them snacks. He remembers now, but he had to learn that the hard way. That,
They're all
like
very
it
trainable, aren't they?
That's right. He had to learn the hard way. And now too, like he also, like he does the dishes and he takes out the trash and he does a ton of the like, work things that
Mm,
take actual energy to do that. And now recognizes, because before he didn't recognize the little things that I do for the kids, and for him, the like emotional things that we do, especially as reflectors.
mm,
Um, and now like he does recognize that, especially as he sees that with other people. He'll be like, man, you just gave them 4 years of therapy and insight in like 4 minutes. I don't think
yeah.
they truly recognize it and notice it, but this is really cool that you are able to do that. And so he now sees that and then gives me credit for it. Whereas
Yeah.
before it was like, oh, that's easy for her. The kids are easy for her. Everything's easy for her. And it's just hard for me. And now he sees like, oh, holy crap, this wasn't easy for you ever. You just were, you just were, you know, playing this part the whole time, and it wasn't ever easy. And so now
Yeah.
we both had to let that go and start over. And so that's been really helpful.
I think that's one of the most precious gifts that human design has gifted me and just even other people I speak with. It's just like we've invited this experiment into our lives. I know that some people can get really like, no, it has to be this way, and this way. But I really feel when you're a parent and you're living with people and you actually are in the real world, and I say this with absolute love, but there's a lot of people out there who have been experimenting for a very long time, but they've been able to do it on their own. You know,
Yeah.
they don't have children, they don't have, or if they do have partners, it's a different lived experience. We all need, there's so many different flavors of ice cream in the world, but at this experiment for us in this family, it's been also about um, the mirror meets me as well. While I can be the mirror meets me as well. And it just goes like, I've invited this into this family all those years ago. And even though my partner's not as invested in it as I am, he still shares in my experiment. But it's also me getting my own head out of my ass and teaching myself through my children. As an example, even what you were saying about rush, like my projector daughter can get very upset. She's quadlet. She get very upset when the processes don't follow the structure because she's
Right.
she's a lefty, and I really respect that in her. And so sometimes an example here is in the morning. It's just like, okay, guys, this is what's happening. Get your lunch, blah, blah, blah. We're leaving at 8. 5 to 8 comes. Okay, guys, let's get going. And all of a sudden, she's overwhelmed because, oh, you're rushing. Oh my God,
Yeah.
I haven't gone to the toilet. And oh shit, I forgot my drink bottle. And so she'll then get very emotional. And so
Right.
we had a chat, and I'm learning. I'm like, sometimes when I will say to her, because I'm very honest with my family, oh, don't rush me. Just give me a moment, please. I just need to think about that because she'll come in when she wants something. She's splenic, right? I want my hair done. I'm like, can
Yeah.
you just let me finish writing this email? and so I use these examples and I say, in the morning, how you don't like to be rushed. That's how it feels for me too. So, how are ways that we could help you not feel so overwhelmed in the morning? So, we've got different timers now. It's like, okay, this is the time we're leaving. There's the clock. And then at
Yeah.
7:45, it'll be like, okay, guys, we have 15 more minutes. Just reminding you, drink bottles. If you need to go to the toilet, make sure you got your shoes ready, things like that. And
Yeah.
it was only the other day that she actually said to me, because I asked her, I said, do you feel less rushed now? Do you feel like you have your A, B, C, D, and E all in a perfect organized row? And she said, yes. And I said, does that feel good in your body? She goes, yes. And I went, okay. And I find that we learn that together, and I love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
absolutely. We have a family of ADHDers,
Yeah.
and so we use the Brilli app, the BRILI app, for morning routine stuff because it's the best thing. It's a game changer. I tell patients about this all the time because it is an app that tells you how much time you set the routine. You can put rewards in there if you want and all that stuff. It's even they have it for adults, and then that way they know like this. Okay, it's time to brush your teeth, and you brush your teeth for this many minutes, and okay, now it's time to eat. And if they wake up late, it adjusts the time so that they still have everything they need. It's time to get your backpack. It's time to get all those things so that they're
Yeah.
not so they don't have to hold it in their head of all so that at the last minute they're not like, oh my God, I have all these things. And so that we don't have to, my husband and I don't have to hold it in our head to be like, okay, what about your shoes? What about your backpack? What about your and it's interesting. They love that app. I love that app. It's a game changer. But we turn it off. So we turned it off today. We had a no device day today for the majority of the day, and it's interesting because they one they love devices because they're especially my generation alpha kiddos. But two, the Brilli app, especially like my man Jen and my manifester. So my 14-year-old and my 9-year-old really love that app and really over rely on it a little bit. So that's why we have days where we turn it off so that I can say, okay, now listen to your body. We don't have to be anywhere. Now listen to your body. And my 9-year-old he'll be like, no, but what, but I want to be up by this time so I can do these things and do these things. I'm like, okay, fantastic. You can set an alarm and you can figure that out. And you can also, because your body's telling you want to do that, go for it. But you can set an alarm and you can figure out how to do that because I don't want them to just fully rely on an app to tell them how to get ready for everything. But that's been super helpful. And that's been helpful for me to be like, oh, I I need to do these things by
I
this
need to stay
time.
on task too. So yeah.
That's right. Yes.
I learned the other day about the so just speaking about ADHD. Um I think someone posted something and it made me howl about the floor drobe. I know we're digressing here. The floor drobe, which is basically
Or
your wardrobe that lives on the floor.
on the floor.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, this is makes total sense for me. It's like it's just there. I know the cycling of my clothes. I know where everything is. Why have I been stressing myself to put all of this away and make it all neat and tidy? I could just have a floor wardrobe. It's brilliant. I'm like,
Yes. We have those things that are supposed to be quilt racks? It looks like a ladder that's like leaned against the wall. It's supposed to be like a quilt rack. So I bought one of those and a hat tree for each kid's closet or like the side of their room and for my own room. This is my ADHD hack for the floor drobe because then you
oh,
could just lay it on that or hang it on the hat tree so it's not on the ground. It's
oh,
still
put that on
up off the
Pinterest. Oh
floor.
my God.
It's still
That's
up off
coming
the
to my
floor,
bedroom.
but you don't
Yes.
have to fold them or hang them up.
No,
You
just
just
throw
put
them
it
on
over the
there.
sink. Yeah, that's right. And then like if you want to have a system, you can be like top row is,
Yeah.
only worn for an hour and
Yeah.
second row
And
is
it'll change.
that's right. Or you can just throw them all on there, whatever. And then when
You
it
will
starts
spot
getting
the
really
neurodivergence in the crowd, can't you? Just like,
no,
that
right?
makes sense.
Yeah, but you know what? We say we digress, but this is actually that actually is another type of conditioning that like I let go of. So I was highly conditioned that like that is not okay. Like that's not taking care of your things and that you don't deserve to have things if you can't take care of them the exact way that, society tells you you're supposed to take care of them, especially as a mom. And you have to teach your kids to take care of them in the way that society tells you they're supposed to take care of them. And so that was one of my layers of conditioning with laundry to be like, you know what? I don't care. I don't care. And I'm not made to care
Mm.
about that. And and I, teach my kids what society thinks, and then I let them go with whatever their body tells them. And
Mm,
then we hold space for that in our house.
yeah.
So it does get a little tiny stressful when family comes to visit. I have to take time. It doesn't get stressful for them. Thank goodness, and I'm glad, because we don't I want them to have to be as healthy as they are with that. For me, I have to take time to be like, okay, okay, family is coming.
We have
The
to
the
clean.
the wall is coming, the pressure is coming, and it's okay. We're gonna stay, we're gonna live how we live. We're not gonna change things for family coming. Um, so but that has been a part of my parenting journey, to those little things, to be like, okay, hold on. Why am I
Yeah.
why are we trying to, like, walk on this? Anytime I catch myself trying to walk on that really fine, tight rope, or, like, hammering the square peg into the round hole and being like, this is the way it has to be. Like, mom said that this pan can only be used for these
Yeah. Whose
things.
voice is that? Whose voice is that?
Yeah, to be like, oh wow, that's conditioning.
Mm.
And so letting go of those things is so, so, so helpful. Now, with that said, because I don't know, if I was listening to this, I'd be like, yeah, that's wonderful. Well, let me just say this first. I'm at a place in my life and a point in my life that I just want to recognize that it's very privileged. I am so privileged. I have privilege because of my socioeconomic class. I have privilege because I live in the United States and in a part of Texas. I have nature right outside my door. I have a high education. I'm a high earner. I'm 43, so I've taken the time to really curate my life. I also got incredibly sick and had to do those things to be able to function in life. So I just want to, because I know, like me, especially with really littles, I would have been like, that's wonderful, Laci Wayner and Annie Richardson, that's wonderful for y'all. But what do I do?
Yeah, but
Because
and
last
I also want
year,
to, and I respect that and I appreciate that too. And and I have privilege as well. But at the same time, everybody journeys through something very uniquely to them in their parenting journey. And
yeah,
there's some people who have no family at all to support them, and they are doing this on their own as single parents and things like that. Yeah, so, I understand that. So I get what you're saying, but it's like we all have to respect that no matter the privilege or the not, there's still challenges.
right,
I guess what I'm trying, an
right,
example here is okay, somebody might be this, but they have absolutely no supports. Yeah, people can go, or you can
right.
go and buy it or pay for it, but it's just like there's nothing there for them. I think it's a up and down. Just I
Absolutely,
had to say that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
No, no, and that's exactly where I'm going for that. Where I'm going with this also is, yeah, like last year, my oldest. Well, when my kids were little, it was completely different. Med school, residency. There was no. If I was listening to this, I'd be like, y'all are hilarious. I can't do any of that. Um, but last year, when my oldest had to have all those surgeries, there I knew starting with the very first surgery. I remember even sitting in the hospital room and just thinking, like, okay, darn, like, I'm gonna have to play generator. Like, I'm gonna have to play generator to stay on top of managing all his surgeries, all his physical therapy, all of his follow-up visits, like doing the financial planning, working 80 plus hours a week to make up for the time I was missing, and to make enough money to be able to, like, support our family through it and to pay for his surgeries. um and to juggle all the other kids, because in their homeschooling and where they're supposed to be at what time, and make sure that they're not getting, the being on the back end of the burner while we're going through all these surgeries with him. So I remember thinking that and being like, okay, the difference is, before I understood human design, I would have just done those things, and then in the end been like, why, what is wrong with me? Like, what is wrong with my body? Why am I, like, I would have made myself wrong, and also not understood how exhausted I was at the end. Whereas with that, I knew, okay, I know I have to do these things, and it's not going to be healthy for me, but I don't know how to make sure it all gets done in the way that it needs to get done for him. in a different way. Like I don't have practice at that. I only have 4 years of practicing like living like a
Yeah.
reflector versus pushing myself like I did as a generator. So I didn't have a framework for that. So I was like, okay, I know this is what I'm going to have to do. And so then I need to build in where I can things of rest. I need to make sure I'm eating well. I need to make sure that I can build those things in, but I also need to know that when this is all over, I'm I'm gonna it's gonna take months to recover, and hopefully I will recover because it's burning the candle at both ends. There's not
Mm.
a I don't have a bucket of energy that I'm drawing from, you know? And so I think that was super important for me. Um and I think especially for like moms of young kids, all those things, when there's times that when you're like, I just like taking 10 minutes before you pick them up from daycare, like that's not even physically possible. 1 minute isn't even physically possible. Finding what is possible
Mm.
and knowing that it's vital and that you have permission to do it, and that you are a better human. You're literally designed to operate that way. That was vital for me. That's where I came up on that post, like some of the things I listed. That's one of the places I came up with those things, is when I was practicing medicine. The things I did without knowing it is because I didn't know I was a reflector then, but I knew I needed time. But like taking the extra long bathroom breaks, like I would go to the bathroom that was the furthest. I'm sure my staff thought I had like stomach problems sometimes. I don't know, but I didn't care because I was like, I don't care. I would go to the bathroom that was the furthest away, that I knew I could be completely by myself, and would just stand or sit in there for 5, 10, sometimes like 20 minutes to just do a breathing exercise. I found myself like I would wash my hands for a long time. Like I would let my hands run under the water for a long time. Like little things like that I just was naturally doing because I felt like I needed it to be able to clear some of the energy.
I think this is a
And
big
so
thing
now in
too about that.
hindsight, do
Sorry.
what?
I was just saying, I think that is and exactly what you're saying. Like, we can get caught into this and just go, well, I've found out now that I'm a reflector. I've got to do all these things. I've got to, oh, they're telling me I've got to sleep alone. I've got to be out in nature as much as possible. And, I'm going back to what you were saying there about, if someone's listening to this going, oh, yeah, yeah, good on you girls.
Yeah.
Like, good on you. But it's like, okay, that is the best part of it. Like, okay, that's the top end. If we're looking at it from a scale of 1 to 10, that's 10. What can
Yeah.
you do at even 1.5? And this is the examples that you're giving here. How I'm just going
Yeah.
to slowly wash my hands and actually feel the water, and I
Yeah.
think that's the message in both your post and my post. When that lady was asking, apologies if it wasn't a lady, that person was asking, is it doesn't have to be number 10 on the scale.
Right.
What can you do? And you and I loved when in your post as well, because you were like, I've got my chill room. And I'm like, I've got the same. It's like, that was one thing. And I know not everybody, again, speaking to privilege, I know not everybody can afford that, to have an own room in the house that's theirs, and none shall pass unless you're invited in. And when the door's closed, it's mum's time. But what I always sort of say to people, but what can you do? Can you
Right.
create a corner? And I know that sounds really wanky, but there are so many small things that you can do. And I didn't mean to
Absolutely.
interrupt you there, but I was just like, I
No,
think
no, thank
that's
you.
because we've all got these small things, and they don't have to amount to big things. Everyone does different things or likes different things.
Yeah, that's right.
What are those
We,
things that you just feel good in? What just
yeah,
goes, oh, I can breathe just for a second.
yeah,
Breathe. I'm a big one for noise cancelling headphones. I'm a big one for sound.
same.
If I can, and I believe that with the open centers, because we are so open, if there's any way for us to have a little bit of sensory deprivation, it's like it's a
Absolutely.
buffer. So if that's touch, and I
Absolutely.
know that when you've got a baby who's needing to feed, which I had, again, Manny Gen 4-6 complete wheel center, was
Yeah.
like stuck to my tit for the first 12 months. I didn't think I'd ever get out of the fetal position, but
Yeah,
I did. And it's just like, well, what else can I do when I'm so touched out? How can I shut down some of my other senses so that my body can have a break?
that's right.
They're the things. So outside of, I guess, money and and everyone helping, what can you do? Because I sort of say to people, you are an active participant in this thing called life.
Right.
You are here. You get to decide what's okay for you and what's not. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's setting those boundaries of going, guys, that when that door's closed, I'm sorry, I love you very much. But when mummy has time and mummy has not, sometimes not much, my mornings are my time. I have a cup of tea or a pot of tea or whatever in the mornings, and I do my thing in here, doors closed. And then I come out and I'm like, hi, guys.
Yeah.
Whereas if I don't kind of get that, sometimes I'm like, oh, I haven't fully rinsed yet, and I'm
Yeah.
not as fun or I'm not as engaged. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. We started with knocking. Like we started with knocking. Like you have to knock and ask to come in.
Yeah.
Because saying like I'm gonna close the door and you can't come in, you can't mess with mom, like that was too much for me. I was like, oh my God, that makes me so I'm such a bad mom. I can't do that. So we started with knocking. One of the things I did when we were younger and living in an apartment and my kids were really little, my two oldest, I learned this because my dad passed away, and so I was also grieving. And one of the things well, not they, but one of the things, there's a woman, her name's Alexandra Kennedy. She's amazing about grief stuff. But one of her lessons that she teaches is to set up a space to almost like what we would call an altar, but some people get triggered by that word. But to set up a space where you can go, and a set time, like either every day or once a week, however often you can. It's best to do it every day, but however often you can, that you would make an appointment with yourself that you're going to go to that space and you're going to think about that person and you're going to grieve. You're going to actively grieve and let yourself grieve. And it's super good for your body because then your body knows, okay, you're going to let me feel my feelings at this time on this day, right? Like it really does help. And you don't get those, like, the waves sort of come at a time instead of just like randomly bowling you over in the middle of like taking your kid to daycare whenever the heck, and you're like, oh my God, now I'm bawling and I can't be bawling at this time. But that was super helpful for me because I picked my closet and I set up a little area in like the very bottom back corner of my closet, like a little cave under clothes and everything. And set a time for myself to go there and be by myself and grieve. And I it was back when I was like, okay, I'm going to be a good griever. I'm going to do everything like I'm supposed to. And so, all the conditioning, I'm going to do this exactly like I'm supposed to. And so I did. I did that, and I made sure I did it, at least 6 times a week. And I tried to do it every day. And that was so beneficial because it forced me to be by myself and to like, check in with my body, have some alone time. But it took my dad passing away for me to give myself permission, and me having like random breakdowns in front of patients and professors and my children to be like, okay, I have to take this time for myself. I can't function as a human that randomly breaks down and can't speak to people. But that was super vital. And then I kept that habit. So even when we were in a tiny little house and there just wasn't really space, like that's what I did. And then I slowly expanded it as we got more space in our home. Um, and then added on to it to not just be a time for grief, but also be a time for, meditation and checking in with myself, figuring out, how do I feel by myself alone, those things. And so that was really, really valuable. But that's a place to start also.
Yeah. It's so funny. I just was transported back to a memory which I haven't had for a while. Um, During those moments of when I was raising my first two girls and, on my own, and they were still at young, I had this practice that I would do. And so I've always been a lover of incense. I actually roll my own now, but I love those smells, and they've got to be very authentic spices to smell. But I've always loved them. I've always been drawn to them, and so I was always burning different incense around the house. But I would play, and it could be when we got home or whatever. I'd play. I don't know if you are familiar. This is the old CDs back in the day. Show my age, but the Patameo, which are compilations of world music. And so
I'm not familiar with that, but I'm going to Google it now.
yeah, oh, they probably don't make them anymore. It was old, but I've still got the CDs here, and I've actually found them on Spotify and that. But yeah, Putumayo, and they were like one of my favorites was a French cafe kind of thing, and it was all sung in French, and it's very and salsa music. It was very South American or Cuba, or it was just world music, and for me, it was pure music, and it allowed my nervous system to
Yeah.
relax. And just sorry, I just when you were talking then, I was just transported back to a memory, and I'm like, oh, I've
Yeah.
forgotten that I automatically did that because that was what my nervous system needed to just regulate in
Yeah.
those moments. So I love
Decompress.
that little old, and I a space that you can afford yourself in any way that feels good for you. Smells, sights, flowers. Go and pick yourself some flowers. I find that was another beautiful thing that I would do. And sometimes I find as well, do it with your kids. Like we
Oh,
often
yeah.
feel that sometimes we have to be on our own, but
Mhm.
there is a lot of joy in going, I need this. And I'm actually I really advocate for this. We need to show people, our little people, I believe, how to function differently in the world. And it's just like,
Right.
my little person here might do things differently to me, but I'm going to show you how I do it. And I talk about it like, oh, I really need to get out today. Would you like to come for a walk with me? And then, I'm looking at this flower or this plant because, oh my gosh, look at this. You know what I mean? And before you know it, there's joy there because you're
Right.
kind of educating. And it's just like these small things help us regulate and discharge a lot that we're going through as
Yeah.
parents, as humans.
Yeah. Well, and this is one of the beautiful things about a reflector, right? Like you want them to see you in your like it's the whole we can see the same flower a million times and we're still like, "Oh my gosh. Look at that." My kids tease me because we're in, bluebonnet season here in Texas and it's amazing. There's so many wildflowers. I love it. Which
I've
they
got a
also
tea towel with blue bonnets on it that's finally got too many stains on it. I need to ask you to send me another like blue bonnet because my birth mother, she lived in San Antonio there for so long. I'm like, there you go. Sorry, Lacey, just hit you up right there. It's just like,
Oh,
can you
yes.
please send me a new tea towel of blue bonnets because I loved
I would love to. Remind me though. Will you
it.
remind
Yeah.
me? Okay, please, because I would love to. I know exactly what one I want to send you, but if I don't send it, remind me. Because I would love to. Yeah,
Yes.
so seeing the bluebonnets, they're like, Mom, we've driven past the same patch of bluebonnets like 30 times. And every time you're like, oh my God, look at the bluebonnets. And I'm like, yes, this is true. Which now they know, like, especially the older ones, like, no, I'm a reflector. And they're endeared to it because they're like, this is mom. Mom is just like this. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, but this is, I think, one of our gifts that we just can look at stuff and be like, this is special
Yeah.
this and remind people that this is special and yeah being in nature for me even just rolling down the windows of the car going outside it's like it dissipates some of the energy like I don't know because that's especially with my generators this is where like it's the energy is the two things that I think I struggle is not the right word the two things that are well we'll just say struggle the two things I struggle with are their amount of energy, especially when they have so much and they need and that motor's like revving and you're just like
Yeah.
ah and then also the emotional wave. The emotional wave is hard for me. Like I've really had to learn that they're allowed to feel their feelings. They're allowed to go through their emotional wave and I don't have to fix it or feel some kind of way about it. Those are the really the two things I've had to work kind of extra at that are taking I feel like taking the longest for me to catch myself and have to be like, "Oh, okay, hold on. I'm reacting and responding to the pressure and I need to take a step back and let it flow through me." But when I feel that pressure, it for some reason in nature, being outside, it's like it relieves that pressure a little. It's like it has more places to go than being like, shut up in a small place. So like even when my kids were little, my husband noticed this before I noticed this, but like if they were being like crying in the car or like whining a lot in the car, just being really kind of over the top in the car, I would roll down the windows and at
Mm.
least a little bit. And I didn't even notice that I did that, but my husband was like, "Do you know that you do that every time it?" And I was like, "Oh, that's weird. I don't know." And then now in hindsight, I'm like, I think for at least for my brain, like feeling the breathe, it's like it lets some of that pressure out where it's like, okay, world, help me with this energy world, please. Nature.
That's a good tip. I don't, yeah. I mean, my kids are a bit older now. I don't have as many emotional waves like that, but
Yeah.
yeah, that's brilliant. I like it.
Yeah, the emotional waves. Yeah. So that was the other thing I had to be my man, my 9 year old, my man Jen, his is the one that I noticed myself. I think because he's a 3-5, I'm not sure, but he's the one that I noticed myself um really trying to like shut it down on
Mm.
accident the fastest and the most. My manifester, I think I did when she was little. I think I tried, but it
Yeah.
was but it was very obvious that it was she needed to go through the emotional wave and I didn't like who I was reflecting it, and so I would get space from it really quickly. And so I think I just naturally learned like I need space from the emotional, and she's going to go through it. You can't stop it. It's she's got to go through it. But for some reason, my 9 year old, like that one, for some reason, I was like drawn into it and really would try to fix
Mm.
hit whatever it was to be like, okay, don't be mad, don't be frustrated, don't be sad. Oh, look, like if his brother broke something of his, like immediately I'd be like, oh my gosh, look, I fixed it. I fixed it. Here you
Yeah.
go, fixed. And then he would still be mad. And I would catch myself saying, like, what? It doesn't make sense. You can't be mad anymore. It's fixed. There's not even anything to be mad about anymore. It's fixed. And then
Mm.
I heard myself saying it and be like, oh, especially once I knew better, know better, do better. And I was like, oh, you know what? I'm so sorry. It is fixed. I'm going to lay it right here, but I can understand that you have feelings that you feel about it, and this is your emotional wave, and you have to go through all those feelings, and they can't suddenly stop. So you feel your feelings wherever you want to, and I'm going to go over here, and then if you need me, you come get me. And
Yeah.
he's like, oh, and he would be like, okay, okay, and then he's fine. Like he just it's so interesting. Like they just go through that whole
Yep.
wave process, and then they're like, okay, now I'm okay. It's super super interesting. And so, but that was really important for me to learn. And my
Mm.
husband also is he has an undefined solar plexus also, and so, but us together, it's defined. And
Yeah.
so this was also, I think, one of his reasons when they were really little, it was hard for him to be by himself with the kids.
Mm.
He felt like if I was there, it somehow was better, which in my brain I was like, oh, this is the typical thing where it's because I'm holding all the emotional stuff and doing all the emotional work and the emotional labor and
Mm.
juggling everything. Of course it's easier when I'm there. But learning our human design and all that stuff, I was like, oh, you're not used to feeling the pressure of the emotional wave. And because nobody in his family has it. Nobody,
Yeah.
they're all undefined. So I'm like, you're not used to this. And then when the kids get upset, he's he's reflecting it and amplifying it back to them. Because even they would get hurt and he would be irate, and I'd be like, what? Like, you can't be mad. Like, you can't be more mad than the kid that got kicked. Like, this doesn't make sense to me. And
Yeah.
then in hindsight, I'm like, oh my gosh, you were amplifying, reflecting. And so now we both know, okay, and take a moment to say, okay, they get to have these emotions and we don't
Mm.
have to fix it. Because to think too, the conditioning and the pressure is to be like, oh my gosh, like shut those emotions down or fix it quickly or don't, just the
Mm.
different like conditioning. So that was also helpful for me to learn they're going to go through it and that's okay.
Yeah.
And I can just leave him and he can just go through it and then he'll be fine afterwards. And so
I think I've
that was
had a
also,
lot of different challenges at different times. Just, yeah, that amplification and the go, like feeling the juice rise. It's just like,
yeah,
something happened in the last year, and it might be in that whole fifth, 6 years of kind of experimenting. I don't know, something's shifting. I am less emotionally activated by things. I'm
Oh, that's
really, I'm not all the time, but a lot more. I've really noticed it where I can really step outside of a lot of stuff. Um, that's probably another conversation for another time about the it's not emotional. It's very interesting. Um, but I do find still a challenge for me in parenting is my son's will. And that could just be because, you know, my upbringing and things like that. There's been a lot of, um, you know, a lot of patriarchy in my upbringing, and women are just be quiet, and men were given, in my personal situation, and I'm not going to speak for anybody else. I'm only going to speak for myself. But so I've had a lot of suppression, I suppose. And so when I feel that will of his, and he's only 7, and it just, ooh, I can just go, and he really tries to lord it over me and boss me around. And sometimes I feel activated and I'm just like, I want to sort of say, you don't tell me what to do. No, 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 no. You know what I mean?
ah,
And I'm just like, he is 7. You'll zip it and you'll understand this is your shit. And then I
yeah,
just have to sort of remind him and say, I think that's a great idea, mate. But, and just use your manners. It's very much a manifested thing when I have my little my other pseudo son here.
yeah,
It's just like, yeah, you can, that's fine. Just let's all be respectful of each other. Hey. And,
yeah,
mum doesn't like to be bossed around because you don't like to be
yeah,
bossed around, do you, mate? No. Okay. You know,
yeah.
but,
Yeah, we call it spamming because this is a Generation Alpha term, probably Generation Z term too,
spamming. Oh
but
God, I got so
spamming.
much to learn. What is it?
Yeah, this is just what we call it in our family.
Oh,
We call it, so if someone spams you in like video games, it's when they like if they constantly call you or constantly asking you questions, or they're like, hey, are you there? Hey, are you there? Hey, are you there? Hey, are you there? Like that's called spamming, like in the video game world. And so this is the easiest way for me to communicate to him, to say like, hey, listen, you're spamming me. You need to take a minute and go away and go do something else. I have noted what you told me or what you asked to do, and I will think about it and I will get back with you. You don't need to ask me again. Because he has, all that energy, and he's, especially if he decides he wants to do something, he will ask you. Right now, he wants a turtle. And if we didn't tell him, hey, dude, you're spamming us, you
yeah.
gotta give me some time, you gotta step away, he would ask if we have talked about getting him a turtle, and if he's going to get a turtle and all that stuff at least 12 times a day, at least 12 times. And in
The
addition to
rise
all
of
that,
the rise of Lacey's like, I will respond in my own goddamn time.
yeah, yeah. Well, and I've always been like, I think that's where, I think that was one of the things that was not surprising to me to learn about being a reflector. Like, I have always taken a long time to respond to things and to make decisions. I just always have. And I'm aware of that because it's always bothered the people around me. And it's also been great. I've also I got phenomenal job offers, and they were like, they got into a bidding war about me with each other when I didn't even know that was happening, because they thought I was like playing hard to get because I wasn't responding yet and telling them yes or no. I was just
Yeah.
saying, I still need to think about it. I still need to think about it. So that's always been good. But yes, that little manjin energy of like, I want this. I want it now. Can I have it now? Are you going to give it to me? Can I have it now? 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 Hey, can I have it now? I'm
You've
like,
got to
okay.
you've just got to love their conviction. I sometimes
Yeah.
have to flip that and I'm just like, you know what? Good on you, mate, for just persisting with stuff, because that's actually, don't
Yeah.
ever lose that. But right
Yeah.
now, I've got a parent, you have to survive the next 5 years. Like, it's like, you know what I mean? It's just like with raising kids, isn't it? It's just like, I love that for you, but could you just kind of shift it for us to get through
Yeah.
our time together, and then you can bring it back out, which is completely
I I have
doesn't.
to say, and then I have to be responsible for it also. But I have to say, hey, do you trust me? Like, I need you to trust me that you've told me this information and
Mm.
I completely understand it and I hear you and I will get back to you and it will be this time frame that I get back to you.
Oh,
And then
risky. I
and then
can't
I
do that.
go and write it down and I'm like, "Do you see where it's written down?
Uh-huh.
You can trust me." Because also we're a family of
I
ADDers
was
and
just
my
about to
husband
say, I can't remember
is a
shit.
3-5
My
Well,
kids
my
will
husband is
actually remind
3-5
me of stuff. They go, "Do you remember that you said this?" "Oh, did I? Oh, right. Sorry, guys." I can't, I'm literally like, I cannot be trusted to remember that unless you put it right there and I see it. And even then, if it's right there, sometimes I still won't see it.
Yeah, this is how my husband is. Well, because they all have passive brains. I
Yeah.
don't. Yeah. So I'm like, you can trust me
Oh,
to remember. I will remember it.
yeah.
I will. If I told you I would, mom does what mom says she's going to do. Like, I will remember it. You can trust me.
My
But
partner's a
he, you know
lefty.
what?
Thank
I'm
God
so
there's
glad
one of
you
us.
just said
Actually,
that.
my partner and my daughter are both lefty. My son and I are righties, and you can see it. And I can watch Jason, which is my partner, get quite frustrated sometimes. Like not outward, but you feel he's just getting frustrated with the emotional regulation of the manager with the righty, and just like and I
Yeah.
just sort of say, he's doing his thing. Because we went driving yesterday, my son and I, and Jason had said to me, "Oh, did he talk your ear off the whole time?" And I went, "No, actually, he wanted to listen to music and he was just grooving." And he goes,
Yeah.
"Really? He never does that to me." And I said, "Have you ever put music on and let him groove?" And he goes, "No."
Yeah.
And I went, "Let him groove. He's
Yeah.
got to move it through his body. Let him groove."
Yeah.
Which I want
That's
to ask
right.
you, it leads me quickly, and I know we've been going for a long time because so much,
Yeah,
we've
I
always
just
got so
saw
much to
that. I'm
talk about.
sorry.
Hey, this and parenting, parenting by design in the whole like burn your kids' energy out and,
Yeah.
and the projector or the manifestor reflector trial, let them. I know for my daughter, it works. She likes to go to bed and lie there and be in her own space. She's always
Yeah.
done it. Um, my son, and I've put a note here because he's in a vision indirect light like me. So of course he comes alive at night. But
Mm.
there are times when burning his engine out or burning a generator's engine out, it just doesn't work because it's got to be on their timeline. And I really
Yeah.
feel that with parents. And I sort of say, a lot of the stuff goes, oh, burn their energy out. But it's just like if it's not on their clock or on their body awareness, you're doing them a disservice.
Right.
So
That's right. I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said that. Yeah, that same 3-5 mansion is inner vision. So a little bit I have a cheat, I feel like, in that usually I can, if they have, because you can just feel, or for me, I can just feel that like engine just like revving. And sometimes that's the hardest for me when I'm like, oh my, I can't even them being in the room with me, I'm like, oh my God, like
yeah,
it's so much. Um, and so I will tell my husband, like, hey, and it's usually the younger two. I'm like, hey, I've got two little generator engines that need to be burned out. Can you please go? And usually he also is feeling the same. And he's like, oh
yeah,
yes, we can. We're gonna go jump on the trampoline or we're gonna go mow. But we do same thing. Like we don't like this is a way that this was good for us when we homeschooled because it made us adjust our time frame. We really adjusted our clock to each of our own internal clocks and to their internal clocks. And so one of the things that I learned is that my 9-year-old 3-5 manjin that is also inner vision, um, he gets that energy burst in the evening. It's about like anywhere from 7 to 9 p.m. is when
yeah,
he gets that big energy burst. So, I mean, we could do soccer, we could do all kinds of stuff before 7, and he's still going to have the energy burst from 7 to 9. It's just going to happen. And so, one of the things that we've done is just adjust to where we know, okay, Coda's got to do his energy stuff at that time, and we're going to let him. Because before we would be like, no, bedtime is at this time, and because you got to get up early in the morning for school.
yeah,
And when we were homeschooling, we could be like, well, that's fine. You can stay up till 10 because I won't make you wake up early. And so now we kind of know, okay, this is the time frame that he needs to burn out his energy. And so we let him do it. And so again, that's another thing, like conditioning wise, would have been like an abomination in my family when I was a kid, of like riling the kids up right
Yeah.
before bed.
Well,
But
my
yeah,
son
that is,
just keeps coming out because he's got that inner vision.
yeah,
It's like it's his downtime. His engine's still purring. And it's
yeah,
like, oh, finally, finally. And I know what that's like because I have it too. And
yeah,
whereas in my past self would have been, when kids keep getting up and they keep coming out, mom, or dad, I just need to get a glass of water. And you're like, go to bed. It's just like now it's just like, wait for it. Don't even put a movie on yet. We just got to ride this next half an hour
yeah.
out of Jack's doing his little dance
That's right.
because he needs to get what he's experiencing out of his mind. And he's
Yeah,
got a
that's right.
motorized stroke. So he needs to, and it's just like sometimes it doesn't make it any easier because you're like, oh my God, man, we really want to watch this movie and it's getting late. But other
Yeah,
times it's like I can understand that. But I find
yeah,
that those type of kids, they are like that it's a different energy. It's a different engine that's burning. It's
I
activated.
agree.
I
Yeah,
don't
I
know.
agree. No, I
Explore it
agree.
all. I guess there you go. The options are endless.
That's right. Well, and don't make them wrong. I mean, I think the moral of the story, right, is like ask for rest, create
Yeah.
time for yourself, and create time for rest in whatever way that whatever that looks like for you at the phase of life that you're in. And then also, yeah, like know their design and don't make them wrong and don't make yourself wrong.
Yeah.
Like that's been the things that I have to really just remind myself. And you talking about passive, like that was this was helpful. This was helpful. I learned something really valuable. I'm gonna have to process it, but I never put two and two together that like the reason that I can like him spamming me was not about, like I always thought, oh, this is because his dad doesn't remember stuff because his dad's a passive brain, and I will remember it, and I have to like show him over and over again that he can trust me to remember it. It never dawned on me like, oh, this is about him because he is a passive brain and he can't remember it unless he's holding it in his head. And so this is why he does this. This was super helpful. Thank you. This gave me insight into my child brain that I just didn't. I didn't ever put those two things together. So that's helpful because I think I can help him. I think I can help him with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just love having these conversations sometimes because even though we go off on all sorts of tangents, it's just that you can kind of bounce around the energy of it. And, some of us can, not me, I can't type a lot because I get really like, oh, I can't get out what I'm trying to say, or it comes across wrong. Whereas if I'm talking with someone, I can kind of be in that. Whereas other people are different, we all play to our strengths. But for me, it's just like, oh, if anybody ever wants to have a chat, I'm here to have an actual chat. But going back and forth sometimes can be like you can pick bits out of it. But
Yeah.
these conversations are just so nourishing because we're kind of just bouncing information back and forth and mingling in the new flow of energy. So thank you very
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. Well, and at some point, I think we do need to talk about I think we do need to talk about, like the circadian rhythm stuff and the vitamin D stuff and the dopamine and cortisol dump and
I've
the
got that
actual like
here. I don't know if you want to
body.
just talk about that because what you
Yeah,
said
well,
in that post was really interesting about that dopamine and the cortisol dumping.
yeah, so I mean I can't, yeah, I still have time.
Yeah.
So I am getting in a little bit. I have to go because um I have to braid one of my son's hair for him before he has school tomorrow. So oh my gosh, where to start? So much stuff.
Give
So
us that I'm enticing you in for another chat about this, like the Laci hour next time on this, because it'd be fascinating to share with people.
yeah, well, and there's so much. I mean, this is the one of the main program that I now do with clients in my like wellness coaching. One of the main things that we do is talk through everything that I'm about to talk through with you and like set it up for their own bodies and their own design and all that stuff. So I'm like, man, it's so much information, but we'll do a tiny bit. So the quick version is that, yeah, so the behaviors. So in that post, the person posted about how they end up just scrolling on YouTube. when they really need alone time and they really need rest time, and they don't feel like they get it, and they feel like they're getting burned out, and they're just scrolling on YouTube. So scrolling on YouTube, binge watching Netflix, eating lots of like sugar and junk food, binge eating, staying up really late when you're already really tired, nicotine, smoking, alcohol, obviously, like, other illegal substances like meth, stuff like that. All of those things are intense exercise. Intense exercise is one of them. They're all dopamine chasing. So like there's a trend word right now called dopamining, which I think is like a brilliant word, because you're basically like you're like mining for dopamine, you're looking for dopamine. And so all of the hormones in the body, this, are so interesting, and it's most of them are on a loop, right? So with all the brain chemistry, neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin and cortisol and all that stuff, they're all on feedback loops. And so what that means is that the start of something signals the start of something else. And then once that thing gets too full, then it signifies, it gives a signal to turn this down. So it's on a feedback loop, right? Like,
Yep.
so it's, your brain is always saying like, we need more, or we need less. So it's always on a loop of like, produce more because we need more, produce less because we need less. um so dopamine is your, like, it's known as the feel good hormone, right? So in to balance hormones, I think when people think about balancing neurotransmitters and balancing hormones, at least for me, I used to just, this picture I would get in my head is like a balance, like everything being exactly perfectly balanced. But really, that never happens, right? Like, balance means this, right? Like correcting all the time, like correcting so that you can try to stay in a range. And so, this is what happens with your brain also. And you can get out of balance of those things, and your stress response of your brain it makes you start producing cortisol. So cortisol is like your stress hormone, right? It's incredibly important. You need to have it. It keeps us alive. It's what your brain, it's like, the kind of like a cheat hormone or cheat neurotransmitter that your brain uses when you're highly stressed, to help you to focus and to really know hone in and know what's going on and stay alert, and to function when you're in a stress state, which stress is a big, huge bundle of lots of things, right? Like, there's so many things that can cause stress. Um, and so cortisol, we need it. It's necessary, but too much cortisol can cause all kinds of problems, right? It causes weight gain. It causes that puffiness, that like moon shaped faces, the like, puffiness, especially in women, like here, and
Yep.
then they're like upper back, weight gain around your belly, around your midsection. It's what gives you that feeling when you're really tired of being like really restless, like, oh my God, I'm really tired, but I can't go to sleep. I can't, like, just being restless.
Mm.
That's cortisol. And cortisol is, we know, having cortisol all the time, high levels of it, is really bad for us, because it makes your arteries tighten. It causes high blood pressure. It causes, you're not meant to live like that, right? Like, you're not
Mm.
meant to always be in stress. Like, you're meant to be in like, fight or flight, relax and be cool, fight or flight, relax and be
Yep.
cool, back and forth all the time, not just be like fight or flight, fight or flight, fight or flight.
Mm.
And so what normally happens is, at night when you go to sleep, and it's not just with sleep, it's sleep in complete darkness, that you have to produce. There's some neurotransmitters that you produce that are incredibly important. Like, your brain produces natural melatonin.
Yep.
They're one of the biggest antioxidants. It's like million times stronger than like blueberries and cherries. It's a huge cancer fighter. Like, it's really important chemical that your brain produces. It can only produce it when you've been in complete darkness, when you don't have any light coming through your eye, including your eyelid, for a certain amount of time. And so that's where like circadian rhythm comes in. So you have to be in complete darkness. And then once you've been in that complete darkness for a certain amount of time, that stimulates that melatonin production. And then that feedback loop kicks in, and it makes your body dump your extra cortisol. So
Mm.
your cortisol, it's like it fills up a cup and then it just starts overflowing. and your body won't dump it. And that's when it causes a big problem. You need every night, it's supposed to dump all the way out and then be ready for the next day, right? One of the things that stimulates that is dopamine. One of the things that stimulates it earlier on is you get a big burst of dopamine and it stimulates you to get a cortisol dump later on. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And so when you're doing different behaviors, there are some behaviors that give you dopamine, but don't give you a cortisol dump, or it just causes a tiny little dump, then it keeps
Mm,
on filling up. And so your body is like, it didn't dump. I need more. I need more of that. It didn't dump. I need more of that. It didn't
yep.
dump. I need more of it. It didn't dump. And so that's when people get that feeling of, oh my God, I've got to watch another net. I got to watch another one. I got to watch another one. I got to do another. I got to scroll more. I got to scroll more because your body is telling you like it needs that cortisol dump. It needs the dopamine. It needs the cortisol dump, but you're doing a behavior that gives you just a little bit of dopamine, but doesn't cause the dump. And so that's where a big part of the addiction comes in. Does that make
Mm,
sense?
yes.
Um, and so what you want to do is you want to do behaviors that give you dopamine and cause a cortisol dump. Like the cortisol dump is super important. And sometimes that means like right now it's a big thing. And I think in the like 20, I think this started in like 2018, 2016, 2018. I can't remember. But it's a big thing to do to like do kind of a dopamine cleanse, like a dopamine detox, which means like not doing any of the behaviors that are going to give you like a big dopamine dump and just do the little dopamine behaviors so that you can kind of reset your whole system.
Mm,
I think this is important for everybody. I think it's important for everybody. And evidence science tells us it's important for everybody. I think personally, this is anecdotal, like this is my own experience hypothesis, in of one per like me being the one reflector, well, but also seeing like other reflectors. I think it's even more important for us because I think we're so hypersensitive to everything. So I think we really get hypersensitive to the dopamine and the cortisol. And so for me personally, this is one of the things that I spend a lot of time doing. If I start noticing that I'm getting overtired or I'm getting overstimulated, that feeling of wanting to dissociate, of wanting to be like, I have to turn my brain off, I have to turn my body off. I want no input at all. I need to be completely sensory deprived, 100% of everything. Um, then that to me is a signal of, uh-oh, I've,
yep.
I've gone too far. I've now
Springs too
been
tight. Yep.
hypercortisol. That's right. And so then I make sure when I'm doing my self-care things that I'm doing the things that are going to give me dopamine but cause a cortisol dump.
Mm,
And so that means that's been a big journey for me. Like I, was a Division 1 athlete. So when I think about exercising, like
yep.
I like used to kill myself exercising. So
Yeah.
now I like do way, 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 way less. And it's way more beneficial for me.
Mm,
I won't get that huge like, oh my God, I worked out and now I'm exhausted feeling because that's the big dopamine. That's like
yep.
dopamine chasing, right?
Yep.
But then I will actually get a little dopamine and then dump my cortisol instead of getting the big dopamine and holding the cortisol. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Total sense.
And
And it's interesting. I wanted to hear, and I won't keep you because I know you've got to go, because we're going to talk about this again, and we're going to talk about this from a pre-menopausal, menopausal woman's point of view, as
yeah,
well as female hormones. We want to have
yeah,
this chat with our beautiful Dr. Laci. But what you were just saying there to me makes total sense, because working in the definitely as a birth worker for as long as I have, you can actually get this, what I believe is with an oxytocin. So, and that's a beautiful way of people, those moments in time where you're
same
sitting
access.
there and you're doing something you enjoy and you love it. It's like your body, your nervous system, your central nervous system actually relaxes and you can get cognitive stuff out. That feeling of overwhelm. So when I say to people, like, what is something that actually brings you joy? Not what you think brings you joy, what actually brings you joy? Because a lot of
Yeah.
times we're doing shit that we think that we love when we really don't. It puts stress on the body. So I love what you were just describing them, because it makes
Yeah.
total sense to me. I've just always like thought of it as a more of an oxytocin kind of, but I love this dumping because
Well,
I'm a postmenopausal woman. Pardon?
that's the same axis, right? So
Yeah.
dopamine on the prolactin axis,
Yep.
like it stimulates prolactin. So like it is, that's why you think of it as oxytocin. It's on the same
Yeah.
axis. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah, that's right.
I love that.
Dopamine and oxytocin work
I do
together.
know
Like,
sometimes that I need those dopamine hits though to get shit done because I'm 11th
well,
hour kind of girl, and
right.
that's just how it goes. It's just like, righto, this is not going to get done until I'm getting the hit.
Well, and that's like a trained behavior, right? Because of different
Yes.
things in life. That's true. Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Mm.
Well, and where I think it's important is so for me, I had to give myself permission to do the things that my body was telling me to do. So like this is where I've looked into like the PHS, PHS, the system stuff a tiny bit. I don't know enough about it yet because it's a lot to learn. But this is where this was important for me because there are times when my body would tell me I needed something and I would limit myself for whatever reason. I'd be like, oh, I can't do that because of my kids, or I can't do that because of this, or I don't have time. So I'm just going to lay here and scroll through Instagram. And instead, like I have learned, okay, no, if I suddenly want like a piece of dark chocolate, I'm going to go have a piece of dark chocolate or some like that's a small example, but there were, if I suddenly am like, man, I really want to stretch. I really want to stretch. But I'm like, oh, but this kid is snuggling in bed with me and it's his time to snuggle. And I don't want to like
Yeah.
I don't want to move away from him. I don't want him to feel rejected. And also, I don't want him to do the yoga with me because he's going to hang all over me the whole time. It's not going to be restful. So I'm just going to stay here and do what feels like second best. So what I had to, or what I'll just get by with whatever. So what I had to start learning to do was being picky and listening to my body and being like, no, do the thing that I feel like doing and give myself permission to do it. And then I'm actually going to feel better. I'm actually going to have a cortisol dump. I'm actually going to
Yeah.
feel better and have more energy tomorrow. And that's been a game changer for
Yeah.
me. Like that's like I
Me too.
lost 55 pounds. Like, I mean, it's been game changer for me to
Mm.
actually be like, okay, if you feel like you need to dissociate, like that's hard because you're already so far down. Like
Yeah.
you're like, I don't even know because you're so past not listening to what your body was telling you. But, taking steps to slowly think back, okay, well, where did I feel that initial pressure? Like one of the visuals that I tell my kids is, if you think about human design, if so we like to float the river in here in like the hill country of Texas, like this is a thing where people float the river.
Yep.
And so I think of it as like your body is the inner tube and your brain, your thinking mode and your a little bit your awareness, but your brain is your person on the inner tube that's like looking as you're floating the river.
Mm.
And when you float the river, like you just go, like you just go. The current just takes you, and sometimes it's slow and sometimes it's fast, and it's incredibly relaxing. And you don't really have to make choices. You're just like looking out and you're like, oh my God, it's a beautiful tree. And there's a grass snake on the edge of the water, and that's a little bit creepy, but it's over there. So I'm okay. Like I might be hungry. So we'll eat our picnic in a little bit. You're floating and just noticing those things. And every once in a while you bump up against the side, the current will take you, bump up against the side. So that's where I tell my kids, like that bumping up against the side is that pressure from the undefined sinners saying like, hey, you're bumping up against the side. And just like tubing, like if someone is up, if there's a swing on the side of the river and you're like, you know what, I want to get out of my tube. I want to take a side quest and I want to go swing on that swing, then you can do that. But just know like you're crossing your boundary and you're going on a side quest. 100% you can go on a side quest. Like,
Yeah.
great, do it. It's your life. You could do it. But know that like you're on a side quest. And when you start feeling not self feelings and you're starting to feel, frustration, disappointment, bitterness, anger, all that stuff, it's because you're on a side quest and that's okay. And feel those feelings and remember where the pressure was to get back in the tube and start floating again, right? If that's where you want to be. And so this is what I had to really do with myself to be like, okay, when did I initially hit the edge before I went on the side quest? What was my body telling me? What did I want? That I
Yeah.
was like, no, Lacey, you can't have that right now for whatever reason,
Yeah.
like whatever reason it was. And so now when I get that little tug of like, man, I really want to go outside and stare at the moon, or I want to
Yeah.
go lay on the trampoline and look at the stars, then I do it.
Yeah.
Then I instead of being like, oh, I can't right now because it's bedtime, then I think, okay, well, how can I? How
Hmm.
can I? Because my body's telling me I need this, and I'm gonna get it's I need the medicine of it. You know what I mean? Like I look at it
It's
more
been a
like
game changer,
medicine.
just navigating exactly that way for me too, of just
Yeah.
letting the body drive a little bit more and don't overthink it. I've done more different random shit in this past year. As I said, there's something about this year for me that it's just gone, right, you're stepping into a very new version of this. And it's like I'm doing things that I always in my mind would say, you can't do that. Or you're this and you're that, because this is the sports that you always played. And it's just like the body just goes, no.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's like I'm doing things and they might bring me joy in the moment, but it's just like, yeah, no, I want something else. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
just a game. It is a game changer of just letting the body initiate. And because who gives a fucking shit about
Yeah.
anything else? Because again, that's all conditioning. Sorry, my potty mouth,
Yeah.
but it's
So,
like when I think, oh, I can't do that because blah, it's just like, really? That's this old
yeah.
clunker up here getting in the way. But yeah,
Yes.
for me too, it has
And
been an
it's
absolute
hurting us,
pardon.
right? It's hurt. Well, and it's hurting us. Like this is one of the things
Yes.
I do with the doctor, right? Is this is literally aging people and hurting
Yeah.
people, and I think people do it. I think our societies have done it for so long because I think it gives you a sense of safety of, okay, if you meet this line, if you meet this exact line, you're going to be safe and no one's going to attack you and you're not going to get sick
Yeah.
and everyone's going to love you and you're not going to get thrown out of the tribe and everything will be good if you just meet this line. And then it's a battle because everyone's like, oh well, no, the line is here, oh no, the line is here, oh no, the line is here. And then the cognitive dissonance, like what I see as a doctor, like the cognitive dissonance completely falls away when people do meet that line and stay on that line and then end up injured, or and then they're everything falls apart because they're like, what, I was saying yes sir every time, like it
Yeah.
doesn't make sense. How did I get,
Yeah.
how did this happen to me? And then so I mean, I get that, and I get why we got here. um but just the freedom that happens of being like, oh, there is no
Yeah.
line, and we all have our bodies
Yeah.
are know exactly where our own line is, and that's where we're supposed to be,
The
and that's
freedom.
actually
It's a
good for
freedom.
us. Yeah,
Absolute
that's right.
freedom.
And especially as a parent, you're like, oh my god, now I can
Yeah.
not only can I stop making you sick on accident by trying to make you meet this line, but also I will stop making myself sick by
Yeah.
me not like giving up meeting this imaginary line that really doesn't do anything besides make us all sick.
That's it.
So anyway, no, right? Okay,
Amen.
girl.
Oh, well, all right. We could just keep going. I know. We just bigger conversations to have, I think, in the community. And who better to start it than reflectors?
That's right. Yay. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I know you're probably really tired.
I
Oh,
am
that's
tired, but
right.
I'm also, well, it's the whole undefined throat where I'm like, oh, I talked too much and it was
No,
too, but I like, no, it's okay.
we'll all just have a cup of tea now and we can just like, "Phew, okay, that was a really good chat." And then we'll process. Anyway,
That's exactly right.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, good
Same.
night.
Bye, girl. Have a good
Bye.
day.
Yeah, will do. See ya.